What can a baby doll teach us about the cultural understandings of diet and digestion in the second half of the 20th century? On first glance, not very much, right? But as I'll show you today, the Baby Alive doll, which came out in 1973, can be understood as a figure of digestive efficiency, a concept developed in late 19th and early 20th century nutritional science, in which the human digestive system is understood as a black box. Food enters the black box, magic. The magic happens, and waste exits. Industrial metaphors for the human digestive system were quite prevalent in the early 20th century. Basically, since the science of nutrition became popular in the first decades of the 20th century, nutritionists and women's magazines alike sought to develop diets that contained the perfect ratio of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. In the USDA propaganda for World War I and II, food is represented as the fuel of the nation. Through nutritionally balanced meals, the United States would win the war through the sheer health of its armed forces and civilians. The human body thus becomes part of the war machinery, finely calibrated with this correct ratio of vitamins and minerals. However, as food writer M.F.K. Fisher notes, when the hideous necessity of the war machine takes steel and cotton and humanity, our own private secret mechanism must be stronger for selfish comfort as well as for the good of the ideals we believe in. The balanced meals that provide the fuel for the war machine are, as she notes, nearly impossible to cook, especially during wartime rationing, when both money and products are in short supply. And these balanced meals do not provide the pleasure needed to survive a war. As Fisher says, to live gracefully if we live at all. Food, she notes, needs to satisfy on all levels. Meals that satisfy the real sensuous human appetite, satisfying hunger in more ways than just filling the stomach. By focusing on the nutritional values of food, abstracted through calories and recommended daily allowances, nutrition is divorced from the pleasures of eating. This drive to optimize nutrition had a significant effect on infant food. In the years following World War II, commercially produced baby food came to signify reliable, scientifically determined nutrition. Although historically milk and pap were considered a suitable diet for children under 3 years old, industrial baby food came to be seen as the most efficient way to optimize an infant's nutritional intake, and the age that infants were fed their first solid foods dropped from 5 to 6 months to as early as 4 to 6 weeks.
Open wide.
Dear little baby alive is so sweet, you can pretend that she's learning to eat.
Want more? Mommy has to mix it.
You can pretend Baby Alive eats and drinks when you move the lever and back.
Good girl, bottle's all gone. Oh, my baby needs a clean diaper.
It's fun to baby your baby alive, sweet darling baby alive. Baby Alive comes with everything you see here.
The innovative mechanism inside the Baby Alive doll reflects this early introduction of solid foods to infants. As the first baby doll that could be fed solid foods, the Baby Alive doll came with packages of powdered doll food that could be mixed with water to create a soft and mushy porridge. By spoon-feeding the porridge into the doll's mouth, the peristaltic mechanism inside the doll sprung into action, pushing the food down a tube in the doll's body, where it could be expelled as excrement. Baby dolls are a recently relative phenomenon in the history of toys. Dolls and dollhouses find their origin with adult women. Up until the 18th century, aristocratic women used fashion dolls to display the latest fashions. From the 18th century onwards, changing attitudes towards children made middle and upper class parents a little bit more willing to spend money on dolls for their daughters. And the toy industry developed dolls with mechanisms that made them increasingly more lifelike. By 1823, dolls could say mama when squeezed. By the 1850s, most dolls could close their eyes. From the 19th century onwards, dolls were the companions and imaginary friends of young girls. Girls were encouraged to have tea parties, make outfits, and do housekeeping tasks with and for their dolls. Dolls taught the daughters of middle-class families the social rituals of their class. and provided them with the skills to manage their households and relationships in the world. From the early 1900s, dolls changed from aspirational companions or model adults that young girls could look up to innocent and playful babies that girls were meant to take care of. These new kid dolls, for example, the Campbell Kid dolls, which were launched in 1905, were often sold through soap and other household articles, and the popularity of these dolls led to the construction of a new childhood ideal. These baby dolls were meant to serve a child in role-playing, close friendships, and mother and child bonding. Dolls were firmly marketed and modeled as babies. Toy manufacturers promoted their baby dolls to parents as a crucial part of childhood development. And in women's magazines, baby dolls were marketed to mothers as a way to teach their daughters the duties of modern motherhood. In short, the baby dolls of the early 20th century made girls into little mothers. In the 1930s, baby dolls that could drink water and wet their diaper came onto the market. For example, F&B's Di-Dee Baby in 1934. But the Baby Alive doll was the first baby doll that could ingest relatively solid foods. The manual instructs the young girl to put the spoon into her mouth until she starts to chew, then take the spoon out and watch her eat. When the spoon is pushed into the doll's mouth, this closes the circuit that electrifies the small battery-powered motor and starts the chewing mechanism operated by a series of gears and levers in the doll's head. The emphasis in the instructions to put the spoon into her mouth evoke a sense of aggression underlying the feeding process. If you've ever had the chance to play with a Baby Alive doll or a similar kind of feeding doll, you know that the process of feeding the doll can be quite aggressive. You really have to jam the spoon or the bottle into the baby's throat to make the food go down. I have a distinct sensory memory of feeding my sister's baby born, and I remember having to jam the bottle into the doll's mouth because otherwise the little mechanism would just stay shut and the water would dribble out of the doll's mouth. The feeding mechanism of the Baby Alive doll thus provides a black box model of the digestive system. Food goes in, something happens, and waste comes out. The US patent for the doll describes it as a toy that simulates the eating action of a baby and that is able to convey a material introduced into the doll's mouth away from the mouth to a discharge opening in the doll's body with a peristaltic pump. This is a generous description of the doll. It can ingest a food type material, but it cannot digest it, and the waste it discharges from this opening remote from the mouth is the same material it ingested. Opening the black box of the Baby Alive doll shows us that the main operating mechanism is not located in the doll's gut to digest its food, but in the doll's head. The eating mechanism is powered by a small battery-operated motor that drives several gears to move two arms in the doll's jaw area. The motion of these jaw-like arms pushes the food down a tube, which runs directly from the doll's mouth to its discharge opening. I'm not sure if it should even be called by its anatomical term, and in any case, the appropriate anatomical term may not be appreciated by YouTube. After the meal, the doll is supposed to be flushed with warm water. However, this rinsing process is described as the doll's drink from a bottle. In other words, the process in which the doll's food is rinsed from its inside is framed as yet another act of feeding. After the meal, the doll will have a dirty diaper, and the child receives instructions in the manual on how to change the doll's diaper. With the Baby Alive's doll direct connection between ingestion and discharge, the doll's digestive efficiency is impressive. As a toy, these connotations are amusing. As a model for infant digestion, they recall concerns of physicians and psychologists in the second half of the 20th century on the parental anxiety about feeding their children and their children's bowel movements. A physician writing for the Psychiatric Bulletin in the 1950s notes that even though we have a mass-producing society, we are hardly equipped to produce feces at an appointed hour in accordance with an unrelenting social custom. The anonymous physician warns parents that their insistence on scheduled bowel movements and their use of laxatives on their children In other words, their anxiety about increasing the efficiency of their children's bowel movement causes constipation and, quite possibly, neuroses later in life. Likewise, Hilde Bruch, an expert on eating disorders, notes that many girls who develop anorexia in their teens and early 20s were raised by mothers who exerted disproportionate dominance and control over their digestion as infants. Mothers would feed their babies when they wanted to feed their babies, rather than when the child was hungry, and who claimed that they could intuit or knew when their infant was hungry, and who were obsessed with the bowel movements of their infants. These mothers claimed that their child never gave any trouble and always ate what was put in front of them, or even that they always anticipated the child's need. From this angle, then, the Baby Alive doll teaches this kind of digestive efficiency to the doll mother, so the young girl. It teaches the child that the pleasure of eating is for the mother, whereas the nutrition is for the child. Moreover, opening the black box of the Baby Alive doll reveals the bare process of mastication and expulsion. The machinery of the black box does not produce anything. The boxed gut is empty.